this is probably one of the most tense times internationally, at least in the last decade that I've been covering COPs, but I used to work for the UN before then. This is a very tense time internationally. And in that, we have a more difficult time to make decisions of these 197 countries agreeing. And when a decision is made, it has to feel fair and it has to feel effective around the room, which is very tough to get to. And it's important in these decisions because you're actually recognizing, you're setting a tone, but you're also starting to bring in international law, soft and hard. So this is a huge challenge in it. But the major issues coming in, they are in some ways the same as always. They are finance, they are reducing emissions, they are supporting people to adapt, and they're supporting those who are already have lost everything, called loss and damage. But I'm going to break them down for you. Finance, the initial promise that Hillary Clinton made in 2009 of $100 billion per year by 2020 has never been met. And it is still sort of an issue. They're not now calling it a new target. But the real concern is that the majority of that money is loans rather than grants. So this is always a fight, always a struggle, because without financial support, countries who are the poor, as we call them, developing, though some developing countries are quite wealthy now, but in general, supporting developing countries to act as critical part of the climate Paris Agreement. Loss and damage is another huge issue here, and it's also been a huge positive. Last year, we got agreement on a funding mechanism. 10 years ago, we fought just to get loss and damage recognized. Now we have a funding mechanism. The big fight here will be about getting money into that. And one of the calls that has been asked is for the EU, for example, is trying to get certain high emitting or high wealthy developing countries to also commit. That's a very tender issue because developed countries must lead and they're not leading sufficiently. That would be one of the issues here. Mitigation, keeping temperature rise as pursued and hoped for in the Paris Agreement to a 1.5 temperature rise global limit, which is a closing window. We're way behind on this. So it's always about reducing emissions. The great challenge in this COP is it is being run by an oil executive, and they're trying to get language in there about reducing emissions rather than reducing fossil fuels. This is a major concern here because they want to just put the emissions in the ground rather than reduce extraction of fossil fuels. That's a fight going on, and we know that putting emissions in the ground is not only ineffective, it's expensive, and it has no modeling to keep us to a safer temperature rise. But it is the narrative that fossil fuel countries are pushing here. We call it carbon capture storage. We're also involved in issues that are of great concern here, getting money for adaptation. Also, a global stocktake has been happening, which CUNO has been part of feeding into. That since the Paris Agreement, where are we? What have we learned? Where do we need to go? And we're hoping that global stocktake will be honest, will reflect the science, and will also push us forward. We're also looking at Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Bit technical, but that's all about carbon markets, which we have great concerns over because that's not really reducing emissions, it's just transferring them. And the regulations on Article 6, we are trying to help other civil society organizations to make them strong because right now it's very weak in terms of protecting human rights, indigenous people's rights, and actually making them carbon credits that matter. Also coming up in this one, and then I'll finish off, this is one of the first times we've had a peace statement coming in. There will be a focus on conflict and climate change and peace. Military emissions and military spending are increasingly now being looked at and talked about, and we're bringing that into our work too with CUNO and with side events and also speaking on it. So this is a shift. And then the IPCC, we're the only faith-based organization at the climate science meetings, and we are considered an expert there. And we're constantly trying to ground what is being said into the science and to challenge any myths.